Todd Washburn?
Burn.
Burn?
Born.
Okay. So, can you please state your full name, um, where you served, the dates and years you served, and your exact title?
Where I serve stateside or overseas?
Overseas, please.
Okay, my name is Todd Marcus Washburn, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army retired. I served overseas. First tour Afghanistan, Kabul, from December of 2001 to April 2002. Oh, sorry, that was December 2002 to April 2003, and then I came back stateside and went to Iraq uh, May of that 2003 until, um, gosh, I've been so many times, around April, May of 2004, and then my second tour to Afghanistan was 2005. I want to say March of 2005 to March of 2006.
Excellent. And this is okay if we use video, yeah?
Yeah.
Good. Can you tell us about where you grew up?
Grew up kind of a tale of two cities. I grew up in St. Louis, in the city limits, in the urban environment there. And then after my parents had divorced, I want to say right around 11, 12 years old, I moved out to the country, Jefferson County, which is basically a municipality of St. Louis, right outside, about 45 minutes south, and experienced a little bit of the country life.
Can you tell us a little bit about your country life? Maybe some activities that you did?
I enjoyed fishing a lot. Me and my best friend I grew up with, we would just go run around in the woods quite a bit and just go explore. I mean, there was so much wooded area, so much farmland out there, so I mean, you never know what you would run up against. Everything from just like hunting copperhead snakes to finding somebody's, I don't know if it was an abandoned barn, but it was somebody's barn. And we go messing around in the loft over there, things like that.
And what did it like smell like, and what kind of like what was the atmosphere like when you were growing up there?
In the country?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was fresh. You had all the smells that's devoid in the city limits of, the trees, dirt, fresh incoming rainfall, that kind of thing. The country smells that you don't ever get in the city.
And you said you came across that barn. What did you see in there?
Um, well, there was a loft in there, so it was about 15 feet up in the air, and it was like, hey, let's go jump off of it repeatedly. See if we get hurt.
Did you jump into anything in particular?
In the hay. Yeah, there's hay in the barn.
And then can you tell us a little bit about your fishing trips as well and what those were like? Did you do them with family or with
Um,
friends?
it was mostly with Matt and his dad.
Okay. Can you repeat the question?
I would go fishing with my best friend Matt and his father. Um, there was a lot of streams in Missouri. It's not like here in the desert where you don't. I mean, you could find a stream running alongside any highway, something that's 25, 30 feet wide, maybe 10 feet deep at the most. We'd just stop and we would spend most of our summers that way, just like, hey, let's go fishing here, hey, let's go fishing there. I really enjoyed me and him and his dad would have actually planned like a day away fishing trip of places in southern Missouri we've never been to, or places his dad knew that had good fishing in it, and we'd just go spend a day or two down there and do that.
Um, do you have did you grow up with any particular religion or spiritual background?
No. My mother was Catholic, and she grew up Catholic, went to Catholic schools, was forced to attend Catholic church, and she didn't really believe in forcing any religion on us, and she just said, hey, always told me, hey, you're free to choose whatever you want to believe, so if you want to believe any religion you feel like it's your business.
What was your mom like?
I mean, my mom was dealing with the same things that probably went on a larger scale than I was, with my father being abusive and being an alcoholic. She had to work quite a lot when I was growing up because my father couldn't hold a job, so somebody had to keep a roof over our heads. And she's a very strong woman, very strong-willed, very protective of me. I guess with her not being there so much, I really never had much of a connection with her. Didn't really know a whole lot about her, except for just she was probably my inspiration for my inner strength because of the things that she did have to deal with, and she was strong enough to put up with it for a while. And she kept moving on with her life, and divorced my father, and she made a happy life for herself. Met another guy, my stepdad, married him, and had 2 kids with him. So. Yeah, I'd say she's quite a bit of an influence on me, just with her inner strength and just being as hard as she is.
Do you guys share a fun story together or something interesting?
My mom took me to my first baseball game. I remember she used to work for Dairy Queen, and I'm not sure how she would get the tickets, but maybe her boss was a season ticket holder at Old Bush Stadium for the Cardinals, and I remember my mom taking me to see my first baseball game. And, being a huge baseball fan since I was born, basically, it was the first thing I saw on television that I can remember. I used to watch with my grandmother, and that was probably like one of the more important times. Like, she would get tickets once in a while and take me to see a baseball game.
Can you tell us about what it makes you feel like when you go to these baseball games?
It made me feel sad a little bit because I would have expected my dad to be doing that. But it did make me feel closer to my mom, and it made me feel close to the baseball team, closer, I would say. Instead of watching on TV, you could watch it live, and being that St. Louis is a baseball town, it's more than just a sport to us. It's our way of life, it's in our community, it's in our culture. And it made me feel like a part of that community, it made me feel like a part of something.
Do you want to talk about your profession then? Since we're kind of on that.
What I currently do?
Yeah.
My profession is I am a radio producer and board operator at 95.7 FM The Game in San Francisco. They are the home of the Oakland Athletics and Oakland Raiders radio broadcasts.
Excellent. How does that kind of tie in with your love for baseball? Like, when did you find out that you really wanted to go into radio?
When I was in high school, I had this class. I think it was a composition class, and we did something that we had to write some kind of like radio script and speak on it. And my teacher was like, "Hey, you got a pretty good radio voice, and you ever think about being in radio?" Because we like that. They had a speech debate team, and they would do radio stuff too. I never really thought too much about it. I was always into radio. Growing up, we didn't have any money, so I had this little black and white camping television, and it had a radio with it, and I would listen to radio all the time before going to bed. And I would listen to, like the wacko, um, weird paranormal shows late at night. I don't know if you're ever familiar with Art Bell. I had this show called Coast to Coast AM. I would listen to that. I'd listen to Paul Harvey quite a bit. He's a big influence in the radio industry. I'd listen to him tell stories. I'd listen to oldies, rock and roll. And again, these are some of the stations that, like, the only stations I could get in the area. I would listen to oldies, and I was always really fascinated with the business. What happens, because all you do is you just hear the information come through the radio. You don't understand the work and the production that it takes to deliver that to the audience. And then I started out watching old television shows like WKRP in Cincinnati, which was a radio show-based show. And then in the 90s came news radio with Phil Hartman and Joe Rogan. And, I just always had this, like, profound attachment to it. So when, I was, like, midway through my career in the military, it was always in the back of my mind, like, what are you going to do when you get out, if you get out? And the one thing I was always connected with other people with was sports. Always talking sports with people from all walks of life, all different fans, and people ended up coming up to me. I started noticing, like, people come to me for information, like, oh, did you watch that game? What did you think? Or, hey, what's this team going to do? Oh, who's going to win this? And which they kind of still do, which is odd because I don't know everything about sports. I mean, there's just too much. But when I got out, I put two and two together, and I was like, well, let's give it a run. Why not? So when I first got out of the Army, I moved back home to Missouri. And I went down. The local radio station was WXOS. It was 101 ESPN St. Louis, and they were the biggest FM station that did sports talk for the local teams. And so they did a local broadcast from a restaurant, bar, and grill place. Excuse me. And I just walked up to there, and I was like, to the radio host, his name was Bernie Michaelis, a really respected journalist around the town, and I was like, hey, I was on Twitter with you talking about, hey, I'm getting out of the Army, I'm coming back home in Missouri. He said, come see you. So I said, here I am. And he's like, hey, talk to my producer, and we'll see what we can do. Unfortunately, their station rules prohibited me from actually being an intern there, because you had to have at least a junior level of college education. But they let me come up in the studio and just see how everything worked and what they do on a day-to-day basis, and I thought that was really neat. And so when I moved out here, I figured I got about 2.5 years left of college, and I might want to, try to continue on that path. And so I, again, through Twitter, I tweeted the program director of 95.7 FM, who used to be the program director out there at St. Louis, and somehow my name had come up when he was out there. And he was like, sure, drop a resume, go to our website, and then we'll give you an internship. And then I did my 6-month internship there, and then they offered me a position.
How did that feel?
Like I had just conquered everything I wanted to do in life. I was like, this is it. I've reached the top of the mountain. It was great. Being able to, be inside and talk to people I've never spoken to before that I would normally not have access to. Being able to, see and talk to a lot of, like, the personalities you get to hear on the radio and talk to them on a personal level to get, like a more in-depth opinion and conversation about things that you don't get to hear on the radio, because it's mostly, it's presented in such a way that it's for a mass audience instead of just a one-on-one.
So, can you speak a little bit about your family then, and if you have any siblings, and how many people are a part of your family, or your core family?
I haven't spoken to my birth father in a long time. I mean, I spoke to him when I got back home from the Army briefly after 17 years, but I don't associate with them anymore. My family that I recognize are my mom, my stepfather, and I have one blood brother, younger brother, and I have a younger brother and younger sister from my mother and my stepfather.
Any fun stories with them?
No, I'm just so much older than them that like my blood brother, he's the second oldest, and he's like 22, 23, I think. No, he's 23, going on 24 now at this point. He'll be 24 in September. After that, like, my sister's 20, and then my younger brother is 19, going on 20.
Oh, so you're older.
Yeah.
And, what was your house like growing up?
Which one?
Whatever one you want to
Uh, I just remember when my mom was married to my real father. Um, we lived in a little one-bedroom apartment in the ghetto, basically, um, South St. Louis. It was a family duplex type thing. We lived on the top floor, and another family lived on the bottom floor. It was rough. We didn't have any money. Um, I remember having one of those dangerous kerosene heaters to heat the house in the wintertime. Um, we put up blankets to seal off rooms that contain the heat, and that was pretty much the state of that. We moved to my grandmother's house, which was a two-family dwelling, like side-by-side type deal. So it was basically a house, but connected to another house for whatever reason. They built those like that many years ago in the city. Then we moved to a trailer, and that was the time when my mom and my dad separated, and I left my father to go with my mother and my stepfather, which briefly they lived in a trailer, and then we moved to this house in the country where I started going to junior high and high school. Um, it was pretty crappy. How many rooms was it? Like 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, little like house that was built probably in like the 30s or the 40s, and we had to share it between all of us. There were 6 of us. And that sucked because I shared a room with my brother, and then like the other 2 shared like a space in between the kitchen and the living room. And then, of course, like when old Todd leaves and joins the army, my parents actually buy a nice house in the middle of the woods, off of the paved road, off of the gravel road, and that's where they currently live today.
Is that in Millersville?
Yep.
Awesome. So, did you ever, well, is there a sad moment when you were growing up that you would like to share? Or a happy moment?
I was pretty sad when my grandmother died. I think of all the people in my family, that's who I was the closest with, my mom's mom. Because when we lived with my grandma, she would watch me, and I don't know where my father was. Maybe he was at work sometimes, maybe he was out doing whatever, but my mother was working, and I shared a lot of moments with my grandmother and she passed away when I was so young. It kind of sucked because I would have liked to have more of those moments with my grandmother, because I didn't really get to know her that well. By the time I started getting old enough to be cognizant of the world, she had already had like her umpteenth stroke, and her kidneys were failing and all that. So it was, her life was being led in treatment on medication. So it was kind of too late to get to know her at that point. So I was really sad when she died.
Can you describe the first time that you guys really shared a connection?
Yeah, see, my grandmother came from German people, and she was really strict. And I remember me and my cousin Julie, like every time we would come over to my grandmother's to visit, we would run, because the 2-family flat was built so you could come through the front door and you could see all the way back to the very end of the house. And we would make a beeline at a dead sprint to go jump on her bed. We thought it was the funnest thing in the world to do. And Grandma used to wear these old Dr. Scholl sandals, and they were like made of wood, like wooden shoes the old women used to wear. And I didn't care where she was sitting in that house, like she could be the starter for any modern baseball team on the planet, because she would wing that thing all the way down and just hit you pinpoint wherever you wanted to, wherever she wanted to hit you. But I got to see a different side of her. There was this little girl named Lindsay, a little blonde girl. We used to live across the alley back behind us, and I used to have this crush on her. I couldn't have been more than 4, 5, 6 years old or something like that at the time. And we would play, and we were best of friends, and it was great. And then one day I was just out of the blue. I don't know what we were doing, but I was like, "Give me a hug." And she was like, "No, you get away from me." And I'm like, "Come on, give me a hug." And I'm like running down the alley chasing her, trying to get a hug. And I chased her into her backyard, and you know how those chain link fences have like the metal doors in them. And me being 18 inches off the ground, she slams the thing, and the latch for the gate caught me in my forehead right here. And it busted my head open, and I started bleeding, and I was panicking, oh my god, my grandma's gonna kick my butt when I get home. So I was trying to figure out some way, and I was like, you know what, I'll just turn on the tears and Grandma will melt. And I went up there and I was terrified because I wasn't quite sure. And I'm going, Grandma, and she was like so nice and so nurturing. It'll be okay. Let me go get a washcloth and dab it for you. And she put a bandage on it and everything. And then she held me, and it was like, oh my gosh. And she was so sweet, and I was like, wow, this is what I've, been missing as a child and what I've been longing for. And, whenever we left her house, that's the kind of nurturing that it kind of vanished.
Did she cook for you as well? Do you need food?
When I was really, really young, when she was still mobile and up and get around, she would make a lot of old German stuff, but she was a diabetic. So a lot of the stuff, as a child, I'm like, blah. She'd eat these like sugarless cookies, and I'm like, cookies, all right. Bleh. She's like, you can have as many of those as you want. But like she used to make old country German potato salad a lot, and I used to love that. It's so good. But
What was your favorite food growing up?
oh man, um, I don't know if I really had a particular attachment to any one food, but I really come to like Neapolitan ice cream a lot. Oh, I would have ice cream cake. I loved ice cream cake. 'Cause my mom worked at Dairy Queen, and she could get them for free. So every birthday, Mom gave me an ice cream cake, and I still eat them to this day.
Can you describe the kind that she sent you?
Um, it's like cake enclosed by ice cream and icing, like cake icing. And in the middle would have this like almost like Oreo cookie crumble and chocolate chips and the layers of vanilla ice cream. Then you have like the cake icing, and the decoration on it. It's just like the most wonderful thing on the planet ever. It is so special to have. I love it.
That sounds great. Um, do you have a favorite memory involving food and just being around people other than your grandma?
In my family life growing up, mm, not really. I took a Japanese class in high school, and that was the first time I got to eat seaweed. Yeah, so it really stood out. I don't eat seaweed. There's a reason. And evidently people snack on that stuff. They make them these big giant squares, and you just tear it off and go to town on it. But as an adult, I know better.
Another, so, uh, what was your reason for joining the military when you were young?
It's kind of a funny story. Well, like I said, I come from modest background, so I had to make the decision. My mom was like, "Look, you can stay here, but you're going to either have to work, join the military, or go to school." I didn't have the greatest grades to try to apply for scholarships and all that because I kind of fell into the senioritis in high school last quarter. I had gotten all my credits taken care of before my last semester of high school, so like essentially, if they could have let me, I would have been able to be gone before graduation, but you still had to be there. So I didn't care, and it really hit my GPA big time. So I was dating this girl that I worked with, and she was in the National Guard, and she was, convincing me like, hey, you should join the National Guard, get college benefits out of it, job skill and all this, yada, yada, yada. And so I went down to the recruiter with her, and I signed up and joined the National Guard, and I wasn't there very long because, when you get out of basic training and your advanced individual training, you're in this hardcore military mentality, and you come back to a reserve or a National Guard unit that isn't really worried about soldiering that much. It drives one crazy, and I didn't even want to be there at that point. I was like, this is a shitbag operation. You guys are the last thing in the world I would look at and call a soldier. I want to go active duty, please. So I ended up going active duty, and it could all be traced to a woman.
And what was it like first getting accepted or joining the military? What were you feeling?
Anxiety. I was nervous. When you sign up, you have this idea of what you see on television and, what you hear about. You don't really think that you're going to go to war. My grandfather was a Korean War veteran. It's terrifying. Like, you're kind of excited, that you're doing something. You're excited that you're going to have a paycheck in your pocket, a job skill, make friends. But I'll never forget that day, that hot, humid May. I think it was a real wake-up call when lights come on at 4:30 in the morning. People are coming down the hallway screaming, flipping lights on, throwing trash cans. Get your asses up. Let's go. Get your socks on. Get outside. Move, move, move. And you're going, what did I do to myself? Oh my God. This is going to suck. And then, a few weeks go by, and like once you do it damn near 24 hours a day, every day, for 8 straight weeks, you get into the mentality and you're used to it, and that becomes your comfort zone. So, after a while, it becomes your way of life. It becomes your job, your career.
So, what surprised you the most about Iraq or Afghanistan when you first arrived?
Well, first, how damn hot it is. I'm sorry. What surprised me the most about Iraq or Afghanistan, and this is, you gotta separate the two because they're not related, really. My first tour was to Afghanistan, and I was, of course, surprised at the culture because I'd never visited a non-westernized country before. I don't think Mexico counts in that, but like the clothes that people wore. You could say it was pretty hot over there, but it was nowhere near as hot as Kuwait or Iraq was. Because you understand, there's a lot of mountainous terrain in Afghanistan, so you're a little bit higher above sea level, where it's pretty hot during the summertime, but it's also can be very, very cold, and they also get snow. Seeing women wearing burqas, just the treatment that they get, the clothes that people wear, how they behave, how they interact with one another. You see two dudes, holding hands, you're like, But that's not how it works. It's an Asian society, and Asians like to hold hands to show a sign of friendship and trust and things like that. So that was probably the biggest shocker, was to realize and look around like you're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. Use the old cliche, just being a tiny little speck in another society. And it was kind of a shock to the system. Whereas Iraq, I would say, is probably a little bit more westernized than Afghanistan. Way hotter. I mean, like when I landed in Camp Doha, Kuwait, we got off the plane, it was like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And at that point in the day, it felt like walking out of your house with the AC on straight into somebody's oven. It was like, oh, good grief. And then once high noon hits, it's hot. And it was so hot on some of those days where we were on a limited work schedule because people were coming down with heat exhaustion and heat stroke, and we were only allowed to be out. It was so hot, like I could only smoke half a cigarette at a time and go back inside of a tent where it was nice and cool. And about every 50 to 100 meters, there was a barrel full of bottles of water just to remind you, make sure you're drinking water and keeping your fluids hydrated. These are the things that I'm like, wow, dude, this is not like back home. You're not getting up. Okay, state the question again, please.
Yeah. What surprised you the most about Iraq and Afghanistan when you first arrived?
What surprised me the most was probably a little bit of the culture and the weather, being able to, or not being able to rather, you know, get up in the morning, hop in my car, ride down the street, see grass, stop at a convenience store, get a soda. Um, you know, seeing women dressed in burqas, seeing the way their society interacts with one another, interacts with us, and seeing a culture that, you know, seemingly, you know, their society hasn't evolved technologically pretty much at all. Um, very primitive. The amount of dirt and dust everywhere was pretty overwhelming.
And did you want to show us what you got today?
Okay.
Just so that I have to look at it.
It's like seeing an old friend, you know? I brought my uniform top here that I had worn at least on my last tour to Afghanistan. Usually we're supposed to turn these in and get new ones. I believe one or two of them I'd probably kept from my other tours. And here's my combat patch from my first tour. American flag, my sergeant rank. And my unit patch there for my unit in U.S. Army, and this is called the Desert Camouflage Uniform. This was the primary uniform issued to the Armed Forces from 2001 to about 2006. And I spent many of days and nights sweating, working hard. You still see all like the dirty sweat stains from the neck that hasn't quite washed out there.
So, did you want to tell me what makes your project special?
Well, I mean, it's a special because it's a piece of my history, a piece of my service. You know, I hold a lot of fond memories, but not so fond memories. You know, it's a reminder of where I come from and who I am. And, you know, I did something that a lot of people don't have the audacity to do. And it's a memory I'd quite like to hold on to.
Is there a story that you would like to share abroad?
What kind of story?
Yeah, what kind of story you want to share?
Well, you want some, I don't know. There's not a whole lot of good, you know. It's not like we go over there for fun and games and play around. It's, you know, lost a couple of friends over there, you know. Lost a close friend of mine. I wasn't there for my most profound experience. Was a guy named Bob Davis. Yeah, he was from Jackson, Missouri, not too far down the road from me. He was kind of, he had this quirk about him that he had this real dry, sarcastic sense of humor. And people didn't get it. You know, just thought he was an asshole, and he wasn't. He was actually a really good guy. You know, just had a brand new baby, married, young kid. You know, kind of one of them woodland type guys. Liked to hunt, liked to fish. Hung out with the other guys in the unit that liked to hunt and fish. But he was really smart, and he was a heavy equipment operator. And he was the colonel's driver at that point. He was the colonel's. I think he was a sergeant major's driver. But if you're the colonel's driver or the sergeant major's driver, you have to be pretty squared away. You know, those are the two most eyes-on people in the battalion. So, you know, they're seeing people above their pay grade, you know, colonels and generals. So you got to have somebody squared away to take care of your stuff, take care of your vehicle. I remember, um, you know, him and I were always in competition together to be the company and battalion soldier of the month, soldier of the quarter, and that entailed various training aspects of, you know, how good are you on weapons, how good are you at physical fitness, and then we would go through a board proceeding where they would ask us questions, and you have to study all the Army regulations and Army manuals and stuff, and I beat him when we were in Iraq, and I was battalion soldier of the quarter, and he was the runner-up, and we were always in that kind of competition. Like anytime something like that came up, some unit activity, it was always me and him competing, stuff like that. But you know, this tour, I really started to get to know him because me and him went to Iraq together in that unit, and he kind of took it a little hard that, you know, people didn't understand him, and I was just starting to get to know him, and it was really sad. He was stop lost, and what that meant was that his contract had expired, but if you were within 90 days of your unit deploying, you had to deploy with the unit, and then you were released 90 days after you returned. And you know, I started seeing him more, and it was August the 18th, 2005, and we were at construction base Kodiak, and we were to get up that morning and get our trucks ready to do a convoy movement from one base to another, and then half of the convoy, for whatever unspoken reason, would break off, and they were going to go to Kandahar. I remember we got up that morning. It was like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. You know, got our trucks ready. We had a cigarette together. And, you know, he had like the coolest, like light blue eyes, and like once I got to know the guy, like I was able to get these expressions and emotions out of him, and it was just like, this is a really great guy. You know, a lot of people are really missing out. It really sucks because that's just who he was. He had this weird, dry. I don't know if you had that experience with me, but it's like who he was. He's, you know, I guess he didn't really like to show the soft side of himself, and that's how he expressed himself, was through his humor. And so he was a part of that convoy that had broken off, and we got up, and I remember the last thing he said to me was, you know, hey, I'll see you over on the other side back at Kandahar, man. We'll talk more. And I was like, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And we got in our trucks, and my part of the convoy broke off and went to our other fire base, and we get into the installation, clear our weapons, put our gear down, park our trucks, and me and this other guy, Eric Jackson, who I was pretty close friends with in the unit, so we'd sat down underneath this awning, have a cigarette, and I had a can of Sprite, and I cracked, and I didn't even get a sip out of it until I heard some commotion coming from all around, and I was confused, and, you know, two of these trucks I saw come speeding into the installation, and this never happens unless it's, you know, an emergency, and just people were called out, we need help, we need help, we need help, you know, get these people out of the vehicles, and you don't really think, you just do, and I just remember helping, you know, lift somebody's body, you know, out of the vehicle, and we get him into our triage area, and I wasn't checking on his vitals. We had a reserve civil affairs officer that was attached to us, who was a flight nurse in the civilian world, so he took the lead on that. And I remember them asking for blankets and for bandages, and that's when I started taking boots and socks and his clothes off, and trying to bandage him. It didn't just really click with me that it was him. And You know, like if you were to cut a tomato and it has that shallow gash in it and you squeeze it, all the juice would come out of it. That's what it was like when I would, you know, just touch him. And you don't understand what's going on at the time, and I'm just, hoping that he's still with us and still alive. And I'll never forget the look that Eric gave me. He went and ran and got some blankets, and after all the commotion, and we had some Afghan medical personnel with us, and I knew it was a bad thing, and the civil affairs officer, Captain Esquivel, put the blanket over his face, put his head down, and shook his head, and we all knew that we had lost Bob Davis. And it hurt a lot of people. 20 minutes later, we lost Lieutenant Laura Walker. She was in the same vehicle. She died on the medevac flight back to Kandahar. Evidently, they were hit with an IED 5 minutes after they dropped us off. He was ejected from the vehicle. And according to the medics, he was dead on sight. That is probably the most profound memory I have of deploying. Is meeting that face to face, because I had not gone through that in my other 2 deployments. He was a good man. And so we all bought these bracelets, raised money for his family, and I haven't taken it off since, except for specific training things that required me to take it off when I was still in. I haven't taken it off since. But I don't see a time when I ever will.
You had talked about Chinese restaurants that you had visited, and the kind of having them as well. Are you gonna talk about what surprised you in terms of the food and abroad, and kind of what that was like for you in terms of
I was just like surprised that in the middle of Kabul, a city that you could just take a look around and see the destruction that had come through that city. It's not like westernized cities or any other city where if you blow it up, we're going to rebuild it. It's still the same it was in 2001. And it's, heartbreaking. I remember going and seeing the ruins of, like, they have a king's palace and a queen's palace. And, little kids go there to play and hang out. And there's drawings everywhere. Here, little kids draw hopscotch and flowers on the ground and animals. And over there, their drawings are planes and bombs and soldiers and guns. So it's what you would have expected out of a war-torn city. But then being with this, civil affairs and psychological operations unit, these guys are closely tied with special operations. So they get all kinds of inside information that other people aren't going to get, amenities for Western-minded people we like. And somehow these guys discovered there was a Chinese restaurant beneath the ruins of Kabul. And I thought that was just amazing. It looked completely untouched. And there was Chinese people running it, which was even more surprising. Like, whoa, where did you guys come from? And you would have never thought you were in the middle of Kabul. It was like so blissful. It was unreal. And I can't remember what I ate or anything like that. I don't think the food was bad. It was probably something like generic, like any American would be like, oh, can I get fried rice and like eggs or whatever, something like that. But yeah, so that was kind of fun.
What is the most common misconception that people have about those who served in the military that you would like to share?
Uh, that were just, I think the
Senior
yeah, I was working on that. The largest misconception I think that people have of veterans is that we're just crazy, gun-toting, warmongering lunatics, and that's just incorrect. I've met some of the brightest, nicest, uh, probably more sane than civilian soldiers in my career that I just, it was an absolute privilege and an absolute honor to be able to serve side by side with. And just because I didn't know them, I mean, anybody from any unit in any uniform at any time, I would give my life for. They signed up to do the same thing that I did, and it doesn't matter, you know, what unit you're in or what branch you serve in. It's all about being there for each other. And I would expect most guys and gals coming out would feel the same way. Um, we're just simple people like anybody else that just, we've been through a little bit more than the average Joe. And I just don't think people understand that.